live.
You're going
I'm
to give
enjoying
us
the conference. I did a session yesterday myself, did a lot of coaching clinic stuff, and interested to see Richard Lawrence's presentation today as well. Probably some more coaching stuff.
What's his on?
His is an interesting topic. It's one we constantly get a lot of questions about, which is, what's the role of a BA? Do you put them on the team or you not put them on the team? What about the UI, UX expert? Those kind of roles. And the struggle people have with how to get that information in the team in a timely manner, and the fact that a lot of people try to either do it totally outside the team or try to put it on the team, and the kind of clunkiness of that, and a suggestion of that those roles in certain contexts are actually better as a extended team of the product owner itself, right? So they're working with the product owner, and then that product owner is bringing that information into the team. So kind of an interesting topic. Very, very, very good topic, actually.
Yeah.
Got those questions just the last week from a client.
Yeah. What was yours on?
I did a talk on, I do more coaching than I do anything else. So I did a talk on immunity to change, which is a process that Lisa Leahy and Robert Keegan came up with. They're two psychologists out of Harvard, as I recall, in the Harvard area anyway. But they came up with a process that talked about how people know what they need to do and know why they need to do it. They're well motivated to make a change in their life, but for whatever reason, they get stuck. They can't make that change. So a classic example that he talks about frequently is heart patients, right? That people who have heart disease go to their doctor, they get diagnosed, the doctor tells them, hey, you need to change your lifestyle. It's really clear in how they need to change their lifestyle. They need to exercise, they need to eat better, they need to relax and get rid of stress. And, a vast majority of those people leave the doctor's office going, okay, got the message, I need to do that. And yet the statistics show only 1 in 7 actually follow through with that. So about 13% of the population actually, faced with that big of a need to change, with clarity about what they need to do, actually make the change. So what's that all about? And how do you actually get the change to happen? So they created a process that exposes the hidden commitment that you may not be aware of, that's actually working against that first commitment. And then you begin to peel into what are the assumptions behind that hidden commitment. And it's kind of what's called a classic subject-to-object move, right? Once I become aware that I've got this other hidden commitment and I become aware of the assumptions, I now can actually effectively start to do something about that because of that awareness. I can run some small tests, or I can say, oh, geez, I didn't realize that I really felt like it was taking away my independence, right?
Yeah. Did you say that was something coming out of the leadership circle stuff? Because that sounds familiar.
No, it did and it didn't. It was interesting. The leadership circle profile is an integration of a lot of different theories, a huge number of theories. That's what Bill Adams and Bob Anderson did, is they kind of synthesized a bunch of theories into that model, into that framework. Part of that framework is Keegan's stuff, and that was relative to adult maturity models. So the idea of a socialized mind where we're motivated more by how we're seen in society and therefore dictating our actions comes about. That's what's called the reactive side of the framework. And the self-authoring, which is to move to being more creative, more liberating, more of a more advanced type of leadership skill. And actually, that's actually how I wound up reading Keegan. Is I was kind of curious to read more about the underlying parts of Keegan's theory with regard to the framework. And I ran into his book on immunity to change, which is just, you could think of it as the framework says, here's how you got to think about moving to creativity. I know I need to do that, but what prevents me from doing that? And now immunity to change becomes a tool by which I can now, dive into what's going on there. How do I break through that?
Okay.
Very powerful. You can do it with, you can do it yourself. You can do it with individuals as coachees, right? And even teams can do it. So we were actually talking in the session how a lot of teams know what they should be doing differently, right? As I said in the session, it's the retrospective topic that keeps coming up. We talked about this before. Why aren't we doing anything about this, right? And so you kind of run an immunity to change process and find out what's really underlying the team's reluctance to go after that primary goal. And that becomes fodder for a lot of the experiments that can happen out of the retrospectives. Oh, we're assuming management's going to be upset if we commit to less stories. Well, let's go test it.
Yeah.
Go find out. Very cool topic. I really, really enjoy those kind of things.
Okay.
And you've recently been at a conference, right?
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, one of the things I wanted to ask you, since it seemed like such a good segue, was we should probably tell people about our Humanizing Work conference, because then they can get more of you and more of this, right?
More of us. Yeah.
Are you doing one of these, a similar topic at the Humanizing Work session?
Yeah, we're actually doing, so Peter Green and I both independently found this immunity to change work. And actually it was a Scrum gathering a year ago that we realized that we were both doing it. Peter has tried the process on his own, some work he's doing with himself, which is really interesting. He's had some really nice success with it. I've been doing, actually, in my talk, I typically am reluctant to do conference sessions, despite the fact that we're always in front of a lot of people and so forth. And so my example was my immunity to change to doing conference sessions. Just kind of put it out there. And actually, I was telling one of our colleagues, Richard, on the way up, that it was actually liberating to do the immunity to change as a method to get myself ready to do an immunity change session at my High Agile. I felt very relaxed. I felt very cool. I was in control. And in the past, I probably would have been just, like this up there, right? But I was actually holding the paper and it was nice and solid. So Peter and I are collectively doing an immunity change work shop at Humanizing Work. And it'll be richer, because at Humanizing Work, it's a lot more intimate. As you know, we have the conference is less than 100 people, right? People have been they're primed for this kind of stuff, right? So they've been through a lot of practices with us and trainings with us, so they're in a better position to take something more advanced like immunity to change and really dive into it.
We call it the alumni conference. At times we call it the alumni conference. So yeah,
it's cool that way, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So you get more, we'll get more time with people. We'll be able to pace them through the process a little more. And I'm expecting perhaps some teary eyes and some major ahas as a result of the session. There's actually, I have no doubt that that's going to happen. So I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. Well, if I'm not doing another session at the same exact time, which usually is what happens, I'll and participate perhaps.
So we ought to talk a little bit about that alumni side part of the Humanizing Work. That's one of the biggest things is we do these sessions, right? These, they call it more advanced sessions. The other thing,
training from the back of the room kind of stuff going on, and a lot, not very much PowerPoint, if any at all. I don't know.
Yeah,
might have a little bit of PowerPoint.
I think we have now expunged all PowerPoint, as I recall.
No death by PowerPoint. I'm looking it up right now just to make sure I get the dates right.
Yeah. Oh, it's June 26th and 28th.
Oh, there you go.
It's coming up. And you can register at humanizingwork.com, HUMANZING work, WORK.com.
We even spelled it right.
Isn't that amazing? The other cool thing I think about it is I have clients, particularly newer clients, go to it for the advanced sessions, but also just to rub shoulders with people who have been doing Agile for a while. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the biggest takeaway is they'll come and they've gotten this hint of what Agile is going to be like, right? And then, but they're kind of struggling. They maybe have some doubts. It's not an easy journey to get started and get the momentum moving. And they go to these conferences and they rub shoulders with people who've been doing it for 5 years and have really hit a very high level of performance. And I always hear this, wow, people really do this, right? They really do. So it kind of infuses some excitement into the building.
Yeah, we've had quite a few people who attend that, and they end up coming out of it saying it was life changing. Which, we don't necessarily go into it and set up a session to change somebody's life. We just teach them something about some particular new theory or a coaching technique or something like that, and then because of whatever they're bringing into it with them, it turns them around, and
Yeah,
we share that with them.
I have been stopped on an elevator at a conference. Literally, I was in an elevator with an individual, and they hit the stop button, and they said, "I was at Humanizing Work last year. You did a session on fierce conversations," which is actually another. We haven't done it for a few years. We're doing another session on fierce conversations this coming time, and they said it not only changed my work life, it changed my family life.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that's cool. That's cool when you see those kind of things.
Yeah, it's a fun conference to get prepared. It's a bit of work, but it's
is it?
Yeah, I like to try out new things there. So it's instead of some of the conferences I go to, and I pull out the old stuff, right? And that's really what they need, like better software. I go that I bring in the old stuff, and it's tried and true stuff is the right way of describing it, and that's what people are looking for. They're fairly new to that environment, and they're looking for the basics. And then we go to humanizing work, and it's like, how are we going to do this differently than we've ever done it before? So
yeah, you have to take it up a notch. Those people are smart people who come to that conference.
Yeah.
Learn from each other. It's kind of nice. What sessions are you doing at Humanizing Work?
Oh, golly. Let's see. I know I'm doing one having something to do with behavior-driven development, and I don't remember exactly what we talked about doing. I think I'm doing that on my own, but I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember exactly what the take was. I think it was something on scenario work, writing scenarios. I'm doing one on the 3 levels of listening and mindfulness, and overlapping those. So yeah,
cool.
And that's going to be an interesting topic. That's going to be actually, that'll be Peter Green, myself, and John Miller on that one.
Oh, that's
all 3 of them, and then
that's quite a crew.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be just the 3 of us there. But last time we did something, John and I did something on just simply on mindfulness practices, and got a whole room full of people. So this one's even more deeper and more related to coaching and that sort of thing. We're going to talk about the listening levels and do some of that practice too. So it'll be pretty awesome. Cool. And I think I've got one other, which, like I say, I guess I should probably look at that and figure out where I am on the materials.
Yeah, I hate to tell you this, our deadline's coming up to turn.
I know, I've got it on the calendar. I saw that, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, one of the things I'll probably be doing while I'm at Better Software West is working on those materials while I sit there and hopefully meet with people in the corridors and the aisles and that sort of thing.
So Software West, what's that?
This is Better Software West. It's coming up in just a couple weeks. It's in Las Vegas, and it's put on by Techwell. It's something that I've done quite a few years over the past 15 or so, and I'm delivering a test-driven development tutorial, a one-day test-driven development tutorial on Tuesday of the conference. And that's pretty much the only thing I'm on the schedule for, except for like one-on-ones. They'll do like little 15-minute one-on-one sessions that are kind of fun for me. And oftentimes I'll give people two back-to-back one-on-one sessions so they can chat with me for half an hour. And it's better. You started out as Better Software many years ago, and now it's Better Software Agile, and now it's Better Software Agile DevOps.
Oh wow.
So, they've got all this stuff.
Yeah. And then you just got back from Deliver Agile, is that right?
Yeah. Agile Alliance's Deliver Agile, which is Deliver::Agile. That was phenomenal. I hadn't been to one before, and I did a fairly non-technical session, sort of a semi-technical session on the business value, effectively, of making your code anti-fragile, essentially, right? We talk about, I know Jake and Tricia talk about in their their Agile leadership course, they talk about making the team anti-fragile. So we talked about the practices for making the code anti-fragile. And that went pretty well. But I have to say that it was like old home week. I saw people I hadn't seen in ages. Jim Shore was there. Arlo Belshi was there. Woody Zuhl, Mr. Mob Programming was there. And I went to more sessions than I normally would. And every single one of them sort of took the bar and elevated it, very similar to what we do in humanizing work, except very technical. I mean, all the sessions I went to, there was code. There was actually code on the screen at some point, and it was totally appropriate. Diana Larson's son, Willem Larson, he's a good friend of mine. He did a session on mob programming, and he turned it into a game. And so there was actually code, but it was also at the same time like a role-playing game. So he mixed role-playing game with a mob programming session. And that sounds a little weird, but he actually manages to pull it off. He's actually one of the best dungeon masters I've ever met. So, and Arlo Belshi did one on refactoring C++ code without tests by relying on the compiler and making very small provably equivalent steps using lambdas, but using lambdas in the newer compilers, and then taking your code and putting it back on your old compiler once it's refactored if you need to. So really weird high level stuff. Jim Shore, I'm on a roll here, right? So
keep going.
Jim Shore, he did a session on mock objects, test doubles, replacing the dependencies of your software in testing with something else, right? A replacement.
Right.
And what he did was he said, you don't need mock objects, and here's how you can architect your system so that it can be testable without mock objects.
Oh, wow.
And that was really intriguing. And he wasn't saying you have to do this. He was saying, here's another tool in your tool set. Some of these cases you might want to use this. It was basically like a null object pattern architecture where you're able to replace the object with a null object, and using that instead of mocks for whatever reasons that you might have for not wanting to use mocks, which there are some. So it was pretty intriguing. And he and I worked together in 2001, and he was already experimenting with that sort of thing. So he was like, I finally filled in the blanks. I finally got to the step where I can describe this with and have it make sense to people. So that was really valuable. And then there was one or two others, but really they were just extremely technical and yet extremely accessible. If you paid attention and followed along, you can go, oh yeah, I mean everything from really archaic looking C++ code, some of the worst C++ code I've ever seen in my life, and he was intentionally showing us that, to some really elegant stuff done with mob programming.
Interesting.
Impressive.
It's an interesting conference because I don't know for certain, but I know that at the Agile Alliance national conference, right? So there was one coming up here into the summer. They kept saying there wasn't enough technical content. Because if you go to these large conferences, even Mile High Agile here, right? The topics, they'll put them into tracks, but the topics will widely vary, right? You could have a whole bunch of things about product owners, and maybe something about Scrum Masters, maybe something about leadership, but it makes for a very rich palette for people to go and pick and choose what they want to go do.
Yeah.
And there's other activities outside of that, right? You got the booths where you can go talk to people and perhaps get some expert advice. There's a coach's clinic actually that I spend a lot of my time in, where people come in with particular questions and so forth. But you get a more focused conference like that, right? And you're allowed to go a little deeper, or you can go a little more, clearer about a particular topic, right? So when you think about conferences, you got to think about what your goal is, and try to pick the one that kind of speak to you, frankly.
It seems to have it's sort of a catch-22 in some ways. It's it's a good thing, and it's not a good thing. I know that somebody was commenting at Mile High Agile in his session he was giving. He asked people how many people were in the room that were developers, and he only had I don't know, 15% of the people in the audience were developers. And then of course you go to something like this, and it's the only way I can describe it is it's sort of the descendant of the XP Universe conferences that we used to have, and maybe even the Uppsala conference, where it's taking the technical stuff to a higher level. And in, when we go to the Agile conferences, most of the other Agile conferences, we're looking at the Agile ceremonies and practices and the frameworks that are available to us, and we're trying to do overall organizational change. And it is kind of it's kind of fun for just, I'll admit it, just a bunch of nerds to go and just talk about code and things that would make other people's eyes glaze over. So it was a great time. We had a lot of fun.
Well, the other thing I think I noticed that over the years that you and I have been involved in Agile transformations, if you roll it back, 8 years ago, the group the audiences spoke to was relatively small, right? There wasn't that many people who were doing Agile. And so the conferences were really addressing those folks. There was this kind of a shift in my perspective that as the Agile population grew, the conferences had to grow in content. So they started to get higher order type of content to keep people who had come last year to come this year, right?
Yeah.
I think it was very telling yesterday at the keynote. They asked before the keynote how many people were, this was the first time they'd ever been to an Agile conference. And out of 900 people, I would tell you, it wouldn't surprise me that it was about half, but it was certainly about a third. A lot of hands went up. So many hands went up, you couldn't see through the crowd. And that means that the conferences, in my opinion, and I think this one did a good job, and I think others are beginning to get that message, you need both, right? You need that content that we did 8 years ago, because you got a lot of people who are first out of the gate in this journey, right? Still,
sure.
Even though it was very pervasive through the marketplace, and you need these higher order sessions.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for these conferences to create a program that speaks to that variety, to the technical versus business versus management, or it's right. Challenging, but I think they do a reasonably good job at it.
That actually brings up one of the techniques that I often recommend to people. I know when I first started going to conferences, 20 years ago or whatever it was, it was, you try to get into every single session that looks interesting to you, even just on the surface, because you have no idea what you're going to need or what you want to learn. And nowadays, I look at who's delivering the talk, who's delivering the session, and it's pretty much entirely based on that. And that helps me, because then I can go to any conference and I can either, attend sessions if I see some interesting speakers or presenters or whatever you want, facilitators. And then I'm also just walking around the hallways and meeting people and talking to them and trying to put on my extrovert mask and that's, introvert, definitely. So. Yeah. But yeah, it really makes it, like they say, you see these conferences that are the unconferences or the open space technology sort of conferences, and they're entirely around the idea that we don't plan anything as far as what the topics are going to be. We just take the people that are showing up and who's got questions and who's got answers, and we put them together. So it's
this conference is actually doing open space. They did open space for all of yesterday afternoon, and they're going to do open space for all of this afternoon. So literally half the conference is open space, right? Okay. It's interesting you brought that up, Rob, because the schedule here, and they'll get this feedback. I'm not worried about it, but the conference titles are in the session, but not the presenters. And I must have heard at least half a dozen people say, if they'd had the titles don't help me a lot. Right. I like the name, right? The other thing I heard from a couple of people that's probably worth repeating for folks going to conferences, is particularly in an Agile conference, is the open space rule of law of 2 feet. Mm-hmm. If you go to a session and it's not working, get up, find a session that looks intriguing, right? It's actually, it's etiquette to be able to walk out and to step in late into different sessions and so forth. So the conference is there for you to mine the information out of. Go, and those hallway conversations is a great way. You'll see old guys like me and you sitting on couches doing webinars and people going by going, I got a moment.
Yeah.
More than happy to share that.
Do you have anybody sitting next to you at this point by now?
No, somebody stuck their head around the corner, but.
Oh, okay. You're wondering what you're up to.
Yeah.
You could grab somebody, we'll interview them. We still have 5 minutes, you know.
The coaches clinics are fun that way. I must have seen 8, 10, 12 people yesterday. So particularly Agile conferences have that, usually have somebody doing a service where I've got a particular problem, or I heard a session and I want to clarify or explore a little more about something in a session, and they go sign up on a board and sit down with somebody who has that experience and get that kind of information. So clearly a lot of richness to this stuff.
What do they call it at Mile High Agile? Do they call it the?
They call it the Coaches Clinic.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Sponsored by Scrum Alliance, actually.
Okay.
So, conferences.
Conferences.
Good with them.
Yeah.
Every time a client goes to a conference, they come back energized. They come back with ideas. So,
yeah,
it's worth going to.
Good experience.
Not only for them, but for us too. I learned things.
Yeah, I always suggest people send their whole team. You know, different people go to different sessions, or they just chat about stuff. So I like that. Plus, that way I get to see the developers, where oftentimes, you know, got to get the developers to the conference too.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Or send them to
managers. Get more managers at the conferences, in my opinion, as well. These higher order ones, anyway. Get them infected.
Everybody. Well, with topics like yours, who shouldn't go to a topic like that? Who doesn't need a little help?
There's topics like that in every conference too, right?
I don't know.
Maybe not sitting there coding. Although I was going to ask you, when you put the C code up, whether it had comments that said HCD anywhere in it, because it could have been.
HCD. That might have been some of your code. Actually, it was code that Arlo Belshi wrote specifically to prove a point, I think. So
he did. Yeah. We'll just have to ask him if he modeled it after my code. Well, it's been good to talk about this.
Yeah, it was great to see you. And I'll see you at Humanizing Work, if not before. So
yes, yep.
Coming up soon.
June 26th and 28th.
I'll get to work on my.
Inclined to join us. We're still taking registrations. I think we're up to 80 plus people at this point. So.
Do we have a maximum?
Rob, that's a good question, and we've been struggling with what that number is. I think we're thinking that. The infamous Dunbar numbers are probably a guide for this, but at this point in time,
I figured it would be capacity of the room. Okay.
We got an answer.
Yes, 100.
100 people max. Okay.
100 people max, and we're about 80, so we still have room for 20 more people.
We're a little over 80 at this point, so we have room. Love to have people come.
Get them fast.
Not a bad, shameless advertising, but hey.
Yes. Oh well, you know.
we do love the conference and love having people there. So
yeah, it's a lot of fun for everybody. Oh, and we should say it's in beautiful Beaver Creek, Colorado, where usually the weather's beautiful and lots of places to go hiking. You might get wet, but not always.
That venue is very cool. It keeps us nice and cozy as a group. That's the other thing I think that we do in that conference, is that it doesn't feel like you go to sessions, break, and everybody's separated out. It stays as a community for those days, and that venue really helps that, because it's you don't want to leave it. It's quite pretty.
And the Park Hyatt is apparently where we're getting this secret information beamed into our brains as you and I talk, and we both see it at the same time. But yes, it's at the Park Hyatt in Beaver Creek.
Beaver Creek, yeah.
So yeah.
All right, sir. Well, I'm going to go and watch Richard explain UI, UX, BAs, and all those kind of roles. I'm interested to see how it plays with the crowd, and probably learn more for myself as well.
There you go. Have fun. Say hi to him for me.
Will do.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now we're all looking for the end button.
I have the end button, but I don't want to
Ashton may
end
have
it.
turned you
She'll
off
just
already.
turn off the stream. Yeah.
There you go.